Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Peter Llewellyn, and I run the services at MedComms Networking.com and the associated website. So information, resources, activities, and so on for people who work in and around the global MedComms community, by which I'm talking people who work in and around medical communications, medical education, medical publishing, and the associated businesses. And importantly, I run services for people who are interested in learning more about MedComms and the associated businesses in terms of wanting a career, for instance, in medical writing, account management, and so on. So you'll find lots of resources, for instance, first MedComms job, careers guides, webinars, and so on. You'll find lots of video content on NetworkPharma TV. So lots of things to go and have a look at if you've not already seen it. At the moment, I'm quite enjoying myself having a chat with some people who work in and around MedComms and finding out a bit more about their personal stories and what they do. Today, I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Eleanor Steele. And I'm just going to hand over to you. Just tell us a little bit about what your background is. How did you start and how did you get into MedComms? Over to you.
Thank you, Peter. Hi, everybody. So I am Eleanor Steele and I work as the MedComms Mentor. I found my way into MedComms a little bit by accident. I did a neuroscience degree and I fully intended to go and do a PhD after that. And I loved the developmental genetics aspect. So in my final year of my degree, I did a research project around developmental genetics and discovered that using microscopes every day gave me terrible migraines. So there was no way that I could do that as my career. So I graduated and spent a little bit of time doing various kind of temp jobs, desperately thinking, what can I do with this science degree? And it came to me that the part of my degree that I'd actually enjoyed most was writing. So all of the essay tasks and things that I'd done and writing up my research project had really been what set me alight. And so I looked for any job that involved science or medicine and writing and communication. And so I answered a job advert in the New Scientist for an editorial assistant at Chameleon and got my very first job in MedComms and had no idea what was involved at all when I started. And that was obviously before all of the lovely materials and resources that you provide, because this was over 18 years ago now. So there wasn't really much information out there about what MedComms was and how it worked and the kind of things that might be available. But luckily, I had stumbled into a career that was perfect for me. And I have worked at a lot of different agencies since, from big networks to tiny independent agencies and kind of everything in between. And during that time, I have mainly worked my way up the kind of medical writing side to the point where I was running the scientific team in various different agencies. So I would be kind of recruiting and training and working with the writers and editors. But I've also done several hybrid positions. So working kind of across medical writing and client services and also editorial as well, because those positions tend to involve a little bit of everything, especially in the smaller agencies where you kind of have to wear all the different hats at once sometimes when things get a bit tough and things get busy, which is definitely a part of agency life. So that background really meant that I got a good grounding in all of the different aspects of MedComms. And another aspect of that is the fact that I did an awful lot of business development from very early on in my career. So I did the kind of initial position as an editorial assistant, but then realized that I really wanted to focus on the medical writing, and then got another job as a medical writer. And 3 weeks in, I did my first pitch, which is fairly unusual for medical writers in general. We don't, as a breed, tend to get involved in pitches and business development that heavily, maybe doing a bit of background research or putting some slides together about case studies for projects and things like that. But I loved pitching and I loved doing business development. So I kind of got a name for myself as the writer who pitched, and threw myself into that aspect of MedComms too, which was a fantastic grounding in the more commercial aspects and the strategic aspects of MedComms. So I have used all of these different aspects in my kind of second career as the MedComms Mentor. So I went freelance 4 years ago now, and during that time, I have kind of built up my business as the MedComms Mentor, and now that is my sole focus. I offer training and mentoring and consultancy with the aim to help all medical writers out there at all career stages fulfill their potential.
Okay, just let me butt in just slightly to clarify it. Because you've talked about the breadth of your background and so on, but you've just said MedComms Mentor, or at least I heard you focus on the medical writing side. But just to clarify that is right, is it? Rather than, so you do focus on the medical writing side, but you have the breadth of understanding of the whole business.
Yeah, I think I focus more on that because that's where the bulk of my experience lies.
Okay.
But I am not averse to working with people within the other disciplines. And I think it's also really important to be thinking about how those disciplines interact with each other, because if we work in silos, then things get a lot harder and projects tend to suffer, timelines tend to suffer, and budgets as well. So one of the things that I really like to do is look at how people can work across the teams effectively, and how they can be taking into account the other things that need to be happening for a project to be successful or for an account to be successful, rather than just thinking, this is my piece of work, I am going to get it done to the best of my ability. Because medcoms is a really collaborative industry, and we need to be aware of what's going on in the background with our colleagues and with our clients, not just, what does this piece of data mean? That's an important part of it, but it's only a part of it.
Yeah, I think certainly going back in time, it was very siloed, wasn't it? You were either a writer or an editor or a account manager, whatever. There are still relatively few that I come across real hybrid roles, but I know they're out there. But most agencies now, it might not be called a hybrid role, but as you say, there's certainly a much more awareness now that the writer, the editor, the account manager, they're working as part of a team, and it's a different way of working than the very silo-driven way in which it used to be in the good old days, sort of thing. Yeah, at least that's the impression I'm getting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something that is sort of evolving is where people draw the line between the different roles, and that can be varied between agencies. And it can also be varied within agencies depending on the needs of a particular account. So it's not set in stone that this is what a writer does and that is what an editor does and these other things are what client services do. There are definitely overlaps, and that can be a bit of a surprise to people if they're moving into a new role in a different company and they've just never really thought about what those people over there do, to find that some of those responsibilities are actually now theirs. So I think it's always useful to be aware of what goes on in the broader project and in the broader account, and be thinking about those things, because that way you're more likely to be able to anticipate issues that might crop up and make sure that you can deal with them proactively rather than hitting a roadblock when they
and it makes it more interesting for people to come in if they appreciate that, and then when they come in they find that the scope is beyond just being the writer sitting in the corner or something like that. It actually just becomes more interesting, and the role becomes more interesting because of that. So I think it's useful for people to understand, and the opportunities can open up and so on, and they embrace that opportunity. Just out of interest, we haven't got a huge amount of time today, but just out of interest, you have bounced around, if I can put it like that, a few different, you said yourself, very different sorts of agencies. Do you have any comments or any reflections on maybe the pros and cons of the small startup versus the independent, large, fast-growing versus the part of a big comms group type of setup? Or do you have a few comments that you give the sorts of people you talk to about those differences between those types of agency setup?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're absolutely right to say there are pros and cons to all of them, and understanding what kind of environment and what kind of working pattern will suit you best is going to make it much easier to find the right job for you and a career that's going to really allow you to flourish. So I think these are sort of quite generalized, but a small independent agency is the kind of place where you will probably be working one-on-one with various different people on specific projects, and you will potentially have to wear more hats than you would in a larger company. And there are definitely more all hands on deck moments when you're working somewhere small, because there are just fewer people around to get things done. But that means that if you're the kind of person who thrives under that environment, you're going to be able to progress quite quickly and maybe get exposed to more different aspects of medcoms than you would in a larger company, where roles tend to be a bit more defined and there are more, shall we say, structured processes that people follow for specific projects. And that kind of flexibility in the small agency suits some people, but it doesn't suit everybody. So in a larger, more kind of network-based agency, there are probably going to be more processes and things. You're more likely to have very structured training and expectations for progression, which can be fantastic if you really want to kind of work through exactly what you need to know so that you feel very prepared and comfortable. But it can mean that it is not as fast potentially, and there are maybe more hurdles to jump over. So different things suit different people, and that kind of structured environment might suit you best, but actually having a bit more of a free flow environment where you're really having to kind of find your own development opportunities and training might be better. Now, there are some small agencies or independent agencies that have their own training programs and really focus on that. And vice versa, there are also some large agencies and networks that don't provide that. They really focus on the on-the-job training and the one-to-one support. And that can be, exactly what you need if you thrive by working with a kind of skilled mentor who can take you through what you need to do. But if that relationship doesn't gel, it can be quite tricky. So thinking about the way that you learn best, the way that you work best, and the kind of environment that you want to be in is very important to identify the right kind of company that's going to suit you and your career.
I think, yeah, no, absolutely, and it's really important people to sort of hear that what you're saying, and it's easy for someone looking to come into the business that it's like, I just want to be a medical writer, and it's just assumed that being a medical writer is the same everywhere. And it's something I constantly say to people is talk to a bunch of different agencies, and you will realise that they can be very different. So part of the process is you finding that environment in which you are going to be comfortable. And the truth is, you may not know, you may just have to take the jump and see. But if you go in understanding that there can be quite a lot of variety there, you will be asking better questions and interviewing the agency as much as they're interviewing you, because you need to understand how it works. So everything that you're saying there is absolutely great. I know we haven't got very long, we could talk longer, so I'm sorry we can't talk longer, but I just think it's lovely just listening to you and hearing your personal story and so on. I'm going to draw a line there, but I'm going to say to anybody watching this, of course, I can say on your behalf that you'd welcome people to contact you. LinkedIn is an easy way of doing it, or I guess the MedComsMentor.com website is there if you want to come that way.
Absolutely. So you can fill in a contact form. You can also sign up using the link on my website to join my email list and hear about what I'm doing. And I'd love to hear from you if you have any questions, or if there's anything that you want to hear a bit more about that we didn't explore in full today, then yeah, that would be fantastic.
Okay, thanks so much, Eleanor. We're just going to give a quick wave and say goodbye. Bye-bye.